Okay, first item is public comment. Do we have any public wishing to make any comments? See anybody else there? Being none, we'll move on to the minutes of January 9th.
Can we ask Zoom user to identify themselves, please?
This is Matt Bykowski.
That was everybody's guess, man. Welcome. Who was that?
Matt Bykowski.
Somebody else? No.
No.
Okay. All right, we have the minutes of January 9th. We would look for a motion to approve those minutes. Motion from Scott, second.
I'll second.
All right, second from Nicole. Any discussion? Not all those in favor of approving minutes of January 9th, signify by saying aye.
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 Same. Leon and Ray are abstaining. Motion is passed. And we move on to the FU24 at Y24 budget discussion.
So I don't have anything to hand out tonight because I basically just posted the draft 2 that we had at the last meeting. I didn't have any direction from the board to make any changes to draft 2, so that's where things currently sit.
So I missed draft 2. That was what I was saying. I missed that. For some reason, I missed that meeting. I don't know what happened, but I missed SVSU draft. And so now, and I thought I was gonna come here and get caught up and see it.
This is the general rundown. Individual departments and functions are on another section.
Is it in the minutes? Well, I can. So I had to go in.
Minutes detail Renee's highlights or notes on the budget.
It was also in the agenda packet.
So draft 1, like we initially, we were at an overall increase of 1.346 million or 4.43% increase. Draft 2 has us down to just under $1 million at a 3.29% increase. The changes that we had from draft 1 to draft 2 were scaling back the number of positions that we had originally identified to move it to that third tier of support staff positions to become registered behavior technicians. So those are the positions that are serving in the NECC classrooms. So we had budgeted initially for all of them to become registered. Right now, we're just a little ahead of 10% of them being registered so far this year. So I pulled that back to 50% for next year's budget. And the other increase that kind of touched all the departments staff-wise was decreasing the HRA liability from, we had budgeted this year at 90% of what our total exposure is, scaled that back to 85%. Still feeling that's somewhat conservative, but just not knowing, what we might see in terms of claims going forward with any, repercussions of the COVID pandemic. So we were previous to the pandemic averaging a usage of around, I think, 76 to 77% of what the complete out-of-pocket costs would be for the employer portion. So still think we're comfortable with it at 85% for now. And then another big change actually from draft 1 to draft 2 was the pre-K tuition that impacts SVU, ESD, and the North Bennington Graded School District. We had scaled back the number of seats, quote unquote seats, or possible spots for pre-K students to go into. So that was almost a $250,000 decrease in that tuition line. for pre-K. And then after a meeting with Suzer IT, there were some minor adjustments to the tech, and I think we ended up saving a little bit of money, but pretty much level funded the tech budget. And those were the changes from draft 1 to draft 2.
I know BVSU folks were concerned, was that only the elementary budget that you had major concerns with? The assessments, I guess.
Well, I don't know that they're, go ahead.
I mean, it's the overall assessments. I just had some notes here for us. I mean, in 2 years, we've seen a 60% increase in the assessments. That's humongous. That's $1,700 per pupil for us. We're spending about over $4,600 per equalized pupil that we have, and even if you go by our total population, it's still about $4,400 per kid. What I think I struggle with the most, I'm not going to speak for other board members, but part of going to a larger SU is economy of scale savings, and I don't think we're seeing any of that clearly. If we're 60% increase in our overall assessment budget, we've gone from about $1 million 2 years to 1.658 this year. That's just enormous. One of our jobs is to educate kids, and how you educate kids is through direct instruction. That's how you get improved outcomes for kids. And when your money is going to the upper levels of an SU, it's really hard to put people in classrooms to teach kids. So that's what we are struggling with significantly here. This isn't anything personal to anybody at the SU. I think you have wonderful individuals here. But we have to find a way, and I encourage this board to implore the SU to find ways to become more efficient, whether that is cutting positions, whether that is through really diving into redundancies. I don't know what that is, but we have to find a way to cut costs here.
And to Todd's point, because we at our district level meeting assumed that the assessments are what they are at this point. And my questions to Renee really are more to try to understand them, because I anticipate that we are going to have questions from our community about that rate of increase in assessments. But we, at our budget meeting, we're looking at a cost per pupil and a tax rate hit that is not financially tolerable for our community. So we're asking our principals to go back and cut $600,000 to $700,000 out of their budget so that we can stay within a total assessments, a total budget that we think is appropriate for the size of our district. And that's terrifying. Like, that's a lot of money. And I've said this to Renee multiple times. She is the one that I look at because she is the one presenting the reports, but my questions are not accusations. They're not, it is just an attempt to try to understand. And if this is the reality of what the SU budget is and our proportional share of it, then that's what it is. But I did have some questions that I had sent over Renee just to try to get at some of that a little bit more. And I don't know that this is the right forum.
So I'm behind in my.
That's okay.
So.
That's okay. So I sort of the same points that I made the last time that we were here is that's a huge pill for us to try to figure out how to swallow.
There's one thing that actually Kate noted to me today that I had not picked up as a specific point for an increase for Arlington. It is in the SU budget and it has been allocated out to Arlington, but there were 4 positions that were reallocated. So existing sped positions that we had either at the SVU, ESD, or Mount Anthony that were basically repositioned, and they're now serving up in Arlington. So that's 4 new that you previously have budgeted in the current year. There's 1 teaching position and three para positions that have been reassigned up there. So that's certainly adding to what you're seeing.
That came out in our discussions after your last meeting. We were back, trying to investigate what that was. And as Renee said, 3 paras and 1 teacher positions that are now in your SU assessment to us that were in the budget before. I don't know or the 2 new ones. That's why I asked Kate to stay. Kate.
They were, so at SVU, ESD, and Mount Anthony are paying for them this year, but they're actually up in Arlington.
So they'll be up there in the budget next year. Good. And is that because, Kate, they followed the student, or what is the explanation for that?
New learners with pretty complex needs entering Arlington School, and Arlington School wanted to serve them in-house versus sending them to more intensive private placement. So I don't want to get into extreme
Right.
details.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And those are the types of things that, that's what we're gonna need
We're
understanding
talking
of.
points. For
Yeah.
you. Yep.
And one of the things, Renee, that I had I think my questions are more clarifying, but when as an example, when transportation is shown on the SU budget is going up $98,000, but the Arlington transportation is going up whatever, 70, does that mean that Arlington is 70 of the $98,000 transportation increase? So what I had asked for, is there any way to see this kind of breakdown by category for the member districts so that you could see this is $98,000 increase and this is how it's hitting each of the districts so that we can see what the proportional share is of these different components.
Yeah, I agree. If we could have how it's all calculated so that everybody's transparent, basically, right, Nicole?
Yeah.
The final page of what's posted for today's meeting with the draft 2 does have the assessment summary as the very last page.
Okay.
That is where you can see basically the net cost. It kind of works backwards. And here I can pull it up.
Thank you for sharing. I didn't go that far into your deck, Renee, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
And I didn't get anything shared for tonight's meeting other than the agenda.
If you click on the link, Celeste, that says agenda, it takes you to the packet.
And if I'm looking at the same
Let me
package,
look.
looking at the same package when you're talking about the transportation, salary, benefits, and contracts and so forth along that line, the last page, the 947, is that what we're talking about? Trying to follow, but it's difficult to follow electronically and then switch back and forth.
What's the assessment summary, which is page 14?
Sure.
I looked at this page before we got here.
Difficult.
So is there a transportation area in special education as well as the
And
I don't have this. Trying to have my computer, I wasn't there when it was posted.
What I was trying to figure out was Renee had given us the SVSU assessments for Arlington broken down by different categories. And under one of our categories of transportation services, it's showing $72,586 $1,586 increase in our transportation services. And I don't know if that corresponds with 2711 in the SVSU budget category, which is a $98,300 increase.
So the
Losing the audience.
the staff and equipment costs for busing for Arlington and Sandgate, that budget is $257,106 in the SU budget. So if you're looking at that 2711 line, 257,106 of that is specific to the Arlington bus drivers. And the bus fleet owned between Arlington and Sandgate School District. So with the assessment coming in, which is 70-ish, I think.
The assessment is 150,
150,
466, and you said the total was
257. So if I put this up.
So Arlington has their own buses, so and their own drivers, therefore. So are their costs being dumped into a total transportation budget and
So you can see
assessed
the cost here. I know it's kind of small. Let me see if I can put this up a little bit. So 257, I'm estimating transportation aid from the agency coming in at 80. That nets the total of 177,106. And then that has been allocated out proportionately based on equalized pupils just between Sandgate and Arlington. And those are the resulting amounts. So when you look at the bottom of the assessment summary, and I apologize, this is kind of like my working document, so it's not really clean and for presentation purposes. So there's a lot of different calculations at the bottom, but for the most part, you know, it's most of these, most of them are basically being driven by proportion of equalized pupils. And that's, I think as I mentioned at the last meeting, it's just the way that it has been done historically. The board is certainly welcome to, you know, come up with a different methodology for assessing. I don't know why it was done this way, but you know, that's kind of what, you know, I've inherited and we've continued to work with. So taking into account, like, because we have 2 union districts, so we have to blend all those towns together and then just the member districts. So I have several different pockets of breakdown at the bottom, which is, you know, some of our SVSU assessments are only assessed out to operating school districts. Some are assessed out, like, for perfect example, the transportation for Arlington and Sandgate is just assessed out between those 2 school districts. The pre-K assessment is only assessed out between SVU, ESD, and North Bennington. So there are little variations, and that's why I have so many different you know, calculations kind of going across the bottom here. But so in the blue, which it should be color coded on the SVSU website, this is showing you what the total budget is. And so when you get over to that line, like that is the total budget for the SU, the 31 million. We have offsetting revenues, which is a combination of fund balances and revenue streams from the Agency of Education, some of which are the Census Block Grant, the Early Essential Education Grant, which is special education for pre-K students, and then transportation aid. So those are what's coming off, and then that net is what gets rolled up into the assessments and allocated out.
So,
So any areas that have like that shaded red, those are items that have not been assessed out to those districts. And we did have last year the refiguring of how we were allocating out the administrative portion of the SU budget. So that has been continued in this year's. So that's a little bit different than all of the other adjustments or proportionate factors down below.
So let me put the question bluntly. Is Arlington shouldering any of the transportation costs that pertain to SVU, ESD, or MAU?
No, I don't.
No, but I think what happened in this current year, because I rolled everything together, I think SVU, ESD, and Mount Anthony are bearing some of the cost associated with the fleet and their staff.
So that deflated last year's number,
Which increases.
which increases this year's number, which
Yep.
makes only puts a magnifying glass on the issues you're feeling.
and I mean, I'm more of an overall person, you gotta understand that from me. We're at $31.3 million for approximately 3,000 students. They're roughly right. That is a huge dollar amount total. I mean, if you look at the BRSU, we get about 17 million for 2,000. That's 50% of what our total budget is for 2/3 of kids. So what I'm saying is the overall number is getting to a point where I just feel like we're on a trajectory that is not sustainable.
And a huge portion of it is educating these kids is more and more expensive, which I know you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More and more, and in this area, we have some really expensive.
Okay.
Yes, you supposed to be.
Well, my question is, I guess 2 meetings ago, we discussed lunch programs and whether or not the lunch program is in this budget or not. And do we have any definitive answer on the free lunches?
It is not funded through the local budget because it's a self-sustaining program. So the employees are paid out of that fund, and the money generated based on the meals that are served create enough of a revenue stream to support that and the cost associated with the contracted service, the management company. So no, you don't have any costs in this budget before you that are related to food service at all.
Thank you.
And just quickly looking across at the general education paras, which I think we have added 6 in this budget that as a request by SVU ESD. So looking at that, special education administration, special ed services, early ed, that totals just over $24 million of this $31 million budget. So that's really staff for SPED and early ed. To just give you a sense of what the other, tech and finance and HR and administration costs are.
So 20, 24, 31.
Especially in early childhood.
But a lot of that gets passed back though. Money is a pass through. I mean, we get reimbursed, but
there's a revenue stream associated with some of that. You know.
So of that 24 million, I have offsetting revenue of 15.3 million. So that's census block grant, that's fund balance, triple E grant, extraordinary sped reimbursement.
Is that baked into the 31 million? That credit? No, so just, I wanted to make sure we were looking at it apples to apples.
So when you look at, let's see, I'll put back up here. When you look at the assessment summary, so that last page of what's on the website now, so that's your 31, this is your total revenue stream.
Yeah.
And then essentially the costs being allocated out to the member districts is that 14.6. But this is just simply what I, looked at was just these final columns highlighting there. That's the 24 million and then the revenue pieces.
May I interrupt again? And did you say the 24 million is for special ed, et cetera? And then 15.3 million is reimbursed?
Correct.
And
It's not just special education, that's our general education paras. There were a few years ago, the SVSU voted to move the general education paras that we had funded in the local districts. They voted to move them to the SU. So essentially their employment changed, but we continue to assess them out directly to the districts in which they're serving. So those costs are strictly allocated out to SVU, ESD, and Mount Anthony, because those are the only school districts that have those positions. The other locally funded paras are maintained in the Arlington local budget. So it's the local paras, it's special education, and it's early education. Is that 24 million?
so then 8.7 million is for paras in the school that are other than special ed.
Gen Ed paras, that totals $1.3 million.
Are you seeing that special education services line be substantially higher than it was a few years ago for you? It's showing 771 for Arlington alone.
Where are you seeing that stuff?
Column P and then in Arlington, saying that the special education services, it's one of the largest in the whole, as being $771,218.
I don't know how to compare that with where we've been in the past, because I don't have a sheet that sort of tracks historical. That's kind of what I was asking Renee for more, is just the context of
The challenge with
Yeah.
looking at that at face value, Scott, is that Arlington and Sandgate are coming into this year as kind of like newborns, right? So they
fully,
there's no fund balance coming in to support them.
There's no offset.
And actually last year, they actually overspent a little bit. So there's a deficit that needs to be made up, which I kind of stretched a little bit. So the other districts tend to have a positive fund balance that helps offset those costs. But this is really the first year that you're seeing that BVSU was, reconciled, went away, and now you're coming in brand new with.
Okay, so Renee, you say we're coming in without a fund balance, but Arlington has had, with the exception of this past year, has had.
So
Carryover.
through the audit, through the FY21 audit.
Yeah.
The auditors basically did journal entries to reconcile, and there was some flip-flop back and forth between BVSU giving money back to the districts and vice versa to settle all that up. So it was basically you're coming in to a clean, fresh start. It is, it's the worst, kind of every factor that you can possibly have is like working against these districts.
For you to know.
What's that?
So those are important things for you to know as you, for your, lack of a better term, your talking points as you bring this budget forward.
You'll appreciate this from your past life, but last year we created for the elementary school board a
One
message
massive
map.
budget.
Well, no, a message map
Oh,
that was when somebody asks you X.
Yeah.
Here are the reasons, the talking points. Every board member got it, so we were all on the same page. I think I got it started, but then
I think you did Katie West. Yeah, because the message map was your term. Your term. Yes.
Katie West helped also polish it all up so that at least none of us liked getting the message or not liked having to give the message, but it was at least we were all on the same page.
No matter how I sell this message, what they're going to see is our supervisor union costs have gone from $1 million to 1.6 in 2 years. That's what they're going to see. I can explain to this that we started with a clean slate and, and it's movement of funds and it's our share of, they see 1.1 million to 1.6 million. That's what they see.
Four additional positions, right, that would be part of that one, that's 600.
And then their question is going to be, why aren't we cutting those positions?
I mean, 4 additional positions is worth roughly $250 to $300.
It's not that much in special ed. I mean, if you're saying you want to keep them in-house, just.
No, you didn't ask us that.
Oh, I was just saying that's when I thought you said that you were keeping them in-house as opposed to.
Katie said that the principals had said that and made that decision.
Oh, oh.
Because the board's going to do what, number one, what is best for the kid, and number two, what is most cost effective.
Yeah.
We don't get down into the weeds that much with that. Obviously, if it's a huge savings, then we'll have a fight with our principals. But
Yeah.
I can't imagine though an out-of-district placement would have been cheaper than that option.
That's why I was just asking, like you said, what that is.
Question?
from what you've shown, the calculations, I'm beginning to understand the rationale behind the amount. Whether or not I am comfortable with it is a different question, but I'm beginning to understand them. That isn't going to make it any easier to make the case. And this is not anybody's doing here, but we had a pretty lean program that we're now part of a much bigger entity, which costs a lot more to run. But in that, we should also be able to demonstrate that that there's value in that for our district. And that's not a question necessarily to answer here, but that is a question to answer when we come to the Arlington meeting, which is Jim was going to work on, like, that sounds like, what are we getting for that? How much of what we're paying for can we see come back in programs and services specific to our schools? If we can present that in a way that is close to balanced, that's an easier conversation to have than to say we're paying this much more to be part of this bigger entity, but we can't trace a significant amount of that money to come back to programs that directly support our students. That's where we're going to have bigger problems. If that is, and I don't know, I don't have that answer yet. I don't know what that looks like.
And knowing that we have 4 new positions certainly makes selling point significantly.
Yeah, I mean, they were in there, but it just didn't flag to me to note it to you.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation I think we'll have to have with our principals. how we move forward with that, if we move forward with that. And the gym, of course.
I also recognize we're coming in way too late in this game to say we need to go back and look at the efficiencies that are in the SU budget and whether or not that, like, this process is way too far down the line. And are the calculations on how the assessments are factored, are they fair and appropriate? We're way too far down the path to have that conversation for this particular budget for this year.
But I think we as a board need to be committed to
Yeah,
looking really closely at it.
I mean, this may
Not
just
at
be
budget
one.
time, but a thorough hindsighting as to how we all got here, so that you may not like, or none of us may like the message, but at
Right.
least it will be very clear.
Right.
Or comments, concerns, questions? Right? No? I haven't seen the second date, so.
So at this point, are we looking for a motion to approve?
I believe we are, because you need time to warn this.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the draft 2, version 2 budget as presented here in this meeting.
Do we have a second? Do we have a actual copy of the assessment sheet? I haven't seen it, so. Well, that's. Yeah, Steve, that's.
I'll second the motion.
I'm gonna have to shoot mine down.
Any further discussion?
I'd like to make a comment for further discussion, that when this is presented to the community, that we have some kind of a pie sheet that says, this is the total budget. This is the money that's spent on special ed and early ed. This is the money that's spent on special ed, early ed reimbursement. This is the money that's spent for paras other than the people who are assigned to special ed, and then admin.
Other comments, other questions, concerns, other discussion?
Anyone who's been around me long enough knows I'm pretty honest, maybe sometimes to a point that I shouldn't be. But I came into this meeting fully prepared to vote no on the budget, because I am not comfortable in saying that this is a fair and appropriate budget for Arlington based on the services that we are receiving. We found out a week ago that our assessments are going up $436,000. That's a week. And within that week's time, we've asked our principals to cut their budgets $600,000 to $700,000 so that we can absorb and get to a point where we have a vote that we can take to our voters on a budget. I'm struggling with that right now, because there's a lot of hard work that has gone in for so many years to build this institution, this entity, this operation. And I'm not saying to anybody here that I think this is a poorly structured budget. For me, as my representation of Arlington, I don't have enough knowledge to say that we are receiving an appropriate amount of services for what we're paying into this budget. And again, I've had 1 week. We collectively have had 1 week to know that our assessments are going up $436,000. And that's massive for a budget our size. So I'm really struggling.
Hey Holly, could you jump out and see if I have stuff on the printer?
And I,
Oh, no, she's gonna check for me. I don't even know if it printed. Try to print them on 11 by 17, so they're big enough to actually read the numbers.
Any further discussion?
Is that what she did in the sheet? I just, yeah.
It's just that assessment sheet.
I'll wait for that to pose further questions.
I don't know what else I can take a look at in terms of, the MAU taken out. I'm looking and I'm saying, besides,
it's on my face.
the services, other services, I can't see.
Does it help to wait for that?
I don't think it's gonna, I mean, it's explanation, it doesn't change anything.
I've seen my assessments through my own budget, so I'm happy, I'm not complaining about them, frankly. But, I did want to see the overall, because I couldn't read the screen very well. Discussion.
Very secret. That's fast. And a mouse? Yeah, to the board members, if you wouldn't mind, because I think they only printed. Thank you. You don't even know what it is. You don't need, okay. And it gets chopped at the end.
None of these things are easy to swallow. No, I'm just throwing that. We struggle with it, and it seemed to me the biggest part is trying to make sure.
Jackie, do you need Renee to put it up on the screen so you could see what was said and Matt, what was just handed out?
To take care of
She
all
could,
of those
if she could
things.
email it,
That
it'd
would be
be
helpful.
easier.
Now,
Or email, either one.
Okay.
you just ran it out of the office.
Sorry, I got chopped off. There must not have been the right size paper in there.
Any other questions? Yeah,
Questions there?
you okay, Rex? Yeah, I'm just looking at Arlington's, trying to digest. I mean, if you're gonna vote, I'll make whatever decision. We have a motion from Scott, second from Jackie. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed?
Aye.
Just in sympathy with Arlington, because I don't think they understand what we're getting into. I need to. So, do we have 4 in favor, 4 opposed?
I think you have to call the names of the people who are, according to Robert's rules, the names of the people who are online.
Matt Bykowski opposed.
Jackie Kelly, 4.
Celeste Keel, 4.
Online? No. We have Leon, 4. Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
We have and Nicole. Scott, 4. And Ray opposed, correct? I read that as a 4. In that case, I will cast a vote to approve the budget. Let's break the tie. The budget is approved for this kid.
I didn't hear you, Dick, man, and maybe Richard didn't either, so could you repeat that?
What I said is, it looks like the count is 4 opposed, 4 in favor, without my vote. So I voted to approve, which makes it a 5-4, and the budget goes forward. I don't think we have anything more on the docket tonight, do we? So we'll make a motion to adjourn. Motion from Todd, second from Leon. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No abstentions? We're adjourned.